So you remember when I said I was going to quit talking about critical race theory unless there was some compelling reason for me to do so? I think I have a compelling reason to do so today. So today on this channel, I am going to bring you a reaction to a promo. I guess it's a promo for something called Inquiry-Based Learning for Anti-Bias, Anti-Racist Teaching. It's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? An elementary school lesson. I'm going to show you a little bit of the promo for it, and then we're gonna watch a little bit of the backgrounder video that explains what it's all about. First thing you need to know, though, is Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut is a big sponsor of this. Sort of a collaboration. It is part of a collaboration effort with Empowering Educators, which is sponsored by Pizza Hut. So if you order from Pizza Hut and you don't support the abuse of children, you might want to reconsider ordering pizza from Pizza Hut after this, because that money that they earn goes into this. So let's get started. All right. This, by the way, comes to us from Myth-Informed MKE. If you do not follow Myth-Informed MKE on Twitter, and you are on Twitter, I strongly suggest that you do start following. Some of the best journalism on this topic is coming from this particular account. Fasten your seatbelts, guys.
My name is Allison Dempsey. This year I'm teaching 5th grade social studies.
For reference, we are talking about 9 and 10-year-olds.
In Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Racist teaching and learning is upholding the systems and sort of like the classroom hierarchy.
Racist teaching. I'm just curious if she was a teacher last year, if she still teaches with teachers from last year, or where are all these racist teachers? You ever notice that they talk all about the systems of just upholding this classroom hierarchy of racism and this racist teaching? Were you aware that the teachers in your public schools all these years, at this point, these are teachers who were children when Barack Obama was president. How did they become racist growing up with a black president? How'd that happen?
Because the children guide the learning.
The children guide the learning. Does that make sense to you that the children would guide the learning of social studies when they're 9 and 10 years old? What's their frame of reference? There's the idea that children should be allowed to ask questions. Of course, there's obviously a big role for the child to play in their own learning, participation in class, discussion, and so forth. But to guide their own learning, I don't know, I'm skeptical.
So what are some racial differences that you've noticed around you?
Leading the witness. What are some racial differences that you've noticed around you? Do we know what these children have learned about racial and where they got that information? Who gave them that information? See, when I was 9 and 10, if you asked me that question, I'm not sure I would have known how to answer, because my idea of racial differences was pretty simplistic. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that they were told a definition of racial differences, because again, at this age, what is it they could have 10 different answers to what even the term means. What are some racial differences you've noticed around you also implies that they have noticed them above and beyond, hey, he's a different skin color than I am. So we're telling these 8 and 9-year-old children that there are differences between people based on race that go beyond what they look like. Why would we do that? And why would we reinforce that? People are, she said.
Different, so they get treated based on how they look.
People are different, so they get treated based on how they look. Did you hear the uptick in her voice, the uptalk? Sounds like she's answering it with a question, like, is that right, teacher?
And who decided that is the dominant culture?
Okay, this 10-year-old, whatever she is, did not come up with the term dominant culture by herself. And she's also asking a question. And who decided that is like the dominant culture? This was told to her. This isn't from her lived experience. There's no way that a 10-year-old would know that somebody individually got treated differently based on the color of their skin because the dominant culture said so. And I doubt she's actually seen that occur.
What is the dominant culture? What does it do?
What does a dominant culture do? We've taught you this. Now spit it back. Come on, give me back what I told you. I use this technique of like, I'm asking you a question that I know you know the answer to because I taught it to you when I'm talking about things like what is a noun, what is a verb, what's a direct object, what's an adjective, what is the difference between character, setting, and plot, things where there's sort of an objective answer. Not this.
They like, make people believe certain stereotypes about a certain group of people.
A dominant culture makes people believe certain stereotypes about a certain group of people. Well, that's one answer. It's not the answer I would give. I would give an answer that has more to do with, well, it's the culture of the majority of the people or the nation in which all the people live that sets the standard for the language they speak and the government speaks to the people, sets the standard for the holidays on the calendar and the kinds of, things that you see walking around in terms of celebrations and art and food and so forth. That's what you see most of the time, most of the restaurants, most of the films. But that would be dominant culture, not setting There's no like cabal of people sitting in a room somewhere going, all right, so the stereotype we've set as the dominant culture for how to treat people is, here you go, please get the memo out. That's what we're doing. No, but that's probably what the student thinks.
Not just blacks, but also browned.
This is definitely firmly in her mind, this fifth grader.
Indigenous, anybody whose skin color is darker.
Anybody whose skin color is darker. Well, indigenous has nothing to do specifically with skin color, does it? But she's just repeating back language that she's heard. There is nowhere you're going to persuade me that this little 10-year-old came into this class knowing any of these terms. And she lives in Brooklyn, so I'm pretty sure she's not like real tight with indigenous people.
Dominant culture is for powerful people with power and
powerful people and people with power. I can't imagine where she got that impression. That doesn't sound anything like critical race theory, does it?
White people make other people think that black people are bad.
White people make other people think black people are bad. Do you think that idea came out of her head? She lives in Brooklyn. Anybody black watching? Do white people make you think you're bad? Can we even do that? Like, do I have the kind of magical power? I sure hope not.
So that's why black people don't have power.
So that's why black people don't have power. Black people don't have power? Oprah doesn't have power? So that's why black people, all of them, all black people don't have power.
If a white person kills a black person, they call it self-defense. But
no. If this is what this child thinks and no one's going to challenge it, that's an opinion.
Black person kills a white person, it says murder.
If a black person kills a white person, it's murder. And if a white person kills a black person, it's self-defense. Again, where is a fifth grader getting this information?
That's how unfair black people's life is.
That's unfair. That's how black people's life is.
They knew it. They actually said everything.
They knew it. They actually said everything. Sounds like she's proud of herself that they memorized all the garbage she taught them, doesn't it? Well, if everything, that means you have a bucket somewhere that everything lives. All the things, all the thing. How? I thought this was coming from them. How do you know where the beginning, middle, and end of everything is? Because you told it to them. That's how you know. All right, let's take a look at the source with info on the partnership and Pizza Hut.
Inquiry-based learning and teaching is for anyone of any grade. I cannot imagine a 7-year-old or a 15-year-old who would not be more excited about being able to guide their own learning and understanding.
Did that look like guiding your own learning and understanding? So far, I haven't seen anything about guiding. I haven't seen anything about inquiry. I've seen repeating back and a teacher going, they knew it. They said everything that I told them. I'm so proud of myself. And I can't imagine a 7-year-old or a 15-year-old wouldn't be excited about guiding their own learning. Actually, I can imagine several that would not be excited about that. I love listening to these young people. These are the same people who discovered French manicures yesterday, or butter on toast was a good thing. Like, did you know you could just do a French manicure? You don't need to file your nails into teeny tiny points or make them look like little coffins to look good. Have you guys ever seen this thing? Yes, we've been doing it for, like 100 years, but whatever. They have this bizarre way of talking authoritatively about things for which there is no evidence, for which they have no evidence themselves, and it's based on their imagination, and therefore it must be true. I can't imagine, ergo it's true. Well, I can imagine it. I can imagine plenty of 7-year-olds whose idea of guiding their own learning has nothing to do with race and learning about oppression and dominant cultures. And if you're trying guiding their own learning, be like, I get to pick the book I want to read. They don't get to do that. I get to decide how much time I want to spend doing math. Nope, they don't get to do that either. So what exactly is it that they're guiding here?
Just doing what the teacher is telling you to do.
That is what they're doing. They take every word and turn it inside out. Inquiry-based learning, when in fact what we just watched was somebody repeating back verbatim the catechism of woke.
One of the reasons I love starting with inquiry is because you don't need to have answers in the first lesson.
You don't need to have answers in the first lesson. Of course they don't, because they don't have answers to these questions, because you have to give them to them, because they don't think about these things the way you do, because they're children and they're not racist.
My name is Allison Dempsey. This year I'm teaching 5th grade social studies in Sunset Park, Brooklyn.
And I lost my comb.
Racist teaching and learning is upholding the systems and sort of like the classroom hierarchy.
Sort of like the classroom hierarchy. We're very firm on this classroom hierarchy. It's sort of like it, because we're upholding the systems and the sort of like.
Inquiry-based learning challenges that model because the children guide the learning. I want to help break down the idea that race is a scientific concept and coax out this idea that race is...
Coax out of kids in Brooklyn who are maybe 10. To coax out means it's in there. Why would it be in there? It's not in there. It's not coaxing out, like it's not inquiry, like it's not guiding.
Has been constructed, and it has been constructed to keep one group in power.
Now, I don't disagree that race as a concept, as a lie about anything, is created by people for the purpose of getting or keeping power. But what's interesting is the only people constantly harping on race and making such a big deal out of it and framing everything in a race box and using a race lens to look at everything are these people who push this curriculum.
For other people. The goal of my first lesson was to gather information about what my students know.
We got to look at this. I hope we can look at this without this doodad here. Okay. Day 1, racism, initial inquiry. So here's where the inquiry comes in, apparently. What do we know about race? What do we know about race? Now, I can imagine a bunch of different things coming out of the students, but I have to stop here and say, what does this have to do with social studies? See, social studies, you're supposed to learn some kind of history. What does this have to do with social studies? What do we know about race? This is going in a direction already. And then it's real small. You guys can't see it. It says, what is race? Where does it come from? What have others told us about race? Now, the kids will have some answers to some of these questions, where they think it comes from, et cetera, and so forth. What do we know about racial differences? Where do these differences come from? What have others told us about it? Okay, so first they are establishing what the students already know. Fair enough. The problem is going to come after that, because they didn't come up with things like dominant culture. They didn't come up with any of that other stuff. And even she led on in the beginning when she said that it's been designed to hold people back. She's got an agenda. She has an opinion about what race is. And the only thing about inquiry-based is that she's inquiring to find the weaknesses and to find the holes where she can plug in her agenda. It's not the students inquiring. All these questions are going to the students. So they're not necessarily bad questions. It's what comes next that's the issue.
The goal of my first lesson was to gather information about what my students know or what they think they know and what questions they have. So what are some racial differences that you've noticed around you? Who would like to share?
And we've seen this. Who would like to share? And then we've talked about that. And then
learning together. They said it in a kid version, maybe, but
they said everything. Remember she said before they said everything. They said it in a kid version, maybe. No, they said the words you gave them to say haltingly and with question marks after them like kids would do. There's nothing about dominant culture that's a kid version of anything. There's nothing about powerful people having power that came out of those kids. I'm sorry. I have a sense of 10-year-olds that didn't come out of them.
Was all that what they brought up was exactly it.
And was exactly it. You see, she started with something and she's like, my students were right. Like, it's amazing that I asked what they already knew, and then I said a bunch of stuff, which I'm not going to tell you what that was. And then they said things, and it was everything and exactly it, the right way that the world is. It's amazing how they were able to do that. You guys, it's like magic.
I feel like what a lot of us are saying right now is that
I feel like what a lot of us are saying right now. First of all, it's not us. They are speaking. And if this is inquiry or this is coming from them, it's what they are saying. It's not what us, it's not we. It's what they are saying. And now we're going with I feel. And I think, I feel.
It shouldn't matter what your difference is. We should respect each other's differences, and it's okay to be different.
Well, that's perfectly fine, and that's nice. And if that's coming out of the children, let's leave it there. Can we leave it there?
Right. Nervousness, I think, is an important part of the process. We have our own baggage around these issues.
10-year-olds don't have baggage around these issues. No, they probably don't. Not in Brooklyn. I doubt they do. And maybe not even lots of other places. They don't yet have baggage around these issues. You obviously do, but I don't think they do.
But you have to start somewhere. You're not going to get it right.
Get it right. Oh, we're letting on. There's a right way.
All the time. You might not even get it right the first few times.
Oh, we have to keep doing the work until we get it right.
You do it. I certainly did not.
I had to freeze there because that's the zombie face. I certainly did not get it right. It took me a few tries beating it into their heads that we're a racist nation and they're experiencing more racism than they know. So I didn't really get it right. That's what I'm imagining she's thinking, because what is right? Get it right?
Now been 7 years, and every year I get better at it.
Every year I get better at it. What is it? You mean indoctrinating these children to see their racism that you see everywhere? Every year I get better at it. I bet you do, because it is a skill to brainwash people.
As a teacher, I'm okay not knowing the answers.
Except you just said they got it right, and that you get better at it every year, and that you didn't get it right.
And a lot of teachers think they have to know the answers and be prepared for any response that's going to come up in there.
Yes, they should be prepared for any response that's going to come up in their class. That's called viewpoint diversity. And if you're not ready to deal with any response that comes up in your class, you're not really allowing space for any response to come up in your class. So it sounds like you actually mean the opposite of what you're saying about the getting it right, but you don't really have all the answers. You're a very confused person.
Classroom, because, kids will say lots of things.
Yes, kids will say lots of things, and you sound very frustrated by that fact, and a little exasperation there.
Have to know everything. You don't have to be the expert. Day 1 is just gathering information about what they know.
We got that. Figured that out.
2, I wanted to...
Do you guys see this? Look at this. Look at this. Look at race, a way we divide humans into groups based on physical characteristics and how you look. No. It's not at all. It's not. That is, wow. Okay.
Have some understanding of how we have so many different skin colors.
Are you an evolutionary biologist? Are you talking about it from a biological framework of why we have so many different skin colors? Because it's utterly irrelevant. It's like super irrelevant unless you're talking about it within a scientific framework. It was like, we have a bunch of different skin colors just because we do. Like, moving on. Because just like flowers in a garden, people are all different shades of everything. Look, our noses are different too. Our earlobes are unique. Did you know that? They're like fingerprints. I mean, are you going to talk about this from a scientific standpoint, or how much time someone stands in the sun or whatever? Or are we literally making it that race is skin deep? In a good way or a bad way? Like, I don't know. You're spending an awful lot of time talking about it if it's something that's not supposed to be important.
And physical differences as humans, but that it's not scientifically based on like true differences between different groups of people.
She's very confused. It's not based on differences of ability and so forth. If you're talking about someone being smarter or less smart or more worthy or whatever. But, there actually are scientific differences, but only your doctor cares about those. It's not something that you'd be talking about in school, unless it's medical school. The rest of it is just, it's kind of irrelevant. Yeah, we're from all over the planet. I'm glad to see a map. But again, it's like they take a little bit of truth and then they put it with a little bit of bull. And,
Here's a map of how our different ancestors developed different skin colors.
Why are we spending so much time on this? I understand if you're in social studies class and you want to teach geography, teach geography. If you want to teach history, teach history. This would be a much more interesting lesson if they were focusing on the actual migration of humankind, not on how we developed different skin colors. To what end? I mean, if you're telling me the goal of this is so that the kids feel like, hey, it's just the natural process that we developed in different skin colors and it has nothing to do with who you are as a person, awesome. But where did all that power and dominant culture stuff come from? See, it's contradictory. This is like a lesson about, hey, guess what? We have different skin colors because nature. Moving on. But somehow that changed into, but power. And white people have it, and they make black people feel like they don't. Well, how does that rest in skin color if skin color doesn't matter?
You might notice that on this map on the left, we know that there's all different types of skin colors. We've even talked about it. But this map on the right makes it seem like there are only 5 groups.
What? What? Have you guys ever looked at a map of the world that way and said, I thought everyone in those places was yellow or pink or green? No, or whatever. There are only these 5 groups of people. I have never in my life looked at a map that way, least of all as a 10-year-old child, and thought, all the people in those places are the same. We even had National Geographic when I was a kid. I knew good and well that wasn't the case. What in the world? These kids have television and the internet, ma'am. It's like, I don't think they're that, wow.
Based on race.
I think that's messed up because there's a lot of people who are different.
What's messed up? We never found out what's messed up.
Kind of like in kindergarten or something, when you were sorting like buttons into different colors. There could be many different types of blues, but we would just put it in the same category.
And what's wrong with that? Like, I don't understand. Are people now buttons? I'm like confused. So do we have to have a separate little category for like the dark blue button and the slightly lighter blue button and then a slightly lighter blue button? But she makes it sound like it's bad that we say like, I got blue buttons, I'm going to put them in my blue buttons. Actually, I have that. I literally have that, y'all.
How did the people invent race?
Didn't we just hear about like all the different skin colors and then had the people invent race? Okay, well, this could be an interesting conversation. It's certainly an interesting question, and people did invent the concept of race. But we just got done talking about skin color, so I'm very confused.
Why did people invent race?
So we know she told them that people invented race. Why does this matter, Deb? Well, again, with the contradiction. If she told them people invented the concept of race, which happens to be true, and then later on she's telling them there are dominant cultures and systems of power, and the power resides with white people, and white people oppress black people, the message is that white people invented the concept of race for the purpose of oppressing black people and brown people, and we're working our way closer and closer to white people bad. You catching on, right? It's in a soft, sweet, inquiry-based learning for anti-bias, anti-racist training way. But that's exactly what this is. It's like we're going to take some truth, and then we're going to put it through a little filter. That's called the lens. And then we're going to tell the kids that humans invented race. That is bad. That the invention of race was for the sole purpose of power, which is true. But that white people did it, which is not true. Which is not true. Every culture on this planet, even within cultures, hello, Rwanda, anyone, have created racial discrepancies for the purpose of getting or keeping power. Mao did it in China with people who to us would probably all look Chinese. And again, like I just said, in Rwanda, they invented slight differences in facial features to have people killing each other, but they were all black. So no, white people didn't invent race, and it's not exclusively white to black that the power structure exists.
I have those same questions.
Oh, well, you're the teacher. You're supposed to know, remember?
Who do you think invented race? And why do you think humans invented race?
People who I guess like ruled something or could make people believe something. Somebody who wanted to like be more like important maybe.
You're already onto the answers that I'm about to give
Wait.
The answers that I'm about to give you. You're onto the answers I'm about to give you.
You know who made race?
I don't know.
You just said you're already on to the answers I'm about to give you. Wait, you know who made race? I don't know, but you just said you do know.
Pepsi.
That's what we're going to find out.
No, you're not going to find out. You're going to tell them.
This whole business all anyway.
I wanted them to first have sort of like this basis
I wanted them to think it was their idea.
of like, oh, even though I think I see race, in the end, we're actually, genetically speaking, more similar than we are different.
Exactly, which is why oppression doesn't live in a little white child, okay? Because we're genetically more similar than we're different.
Them to sort of understand, which I think
I'd like them to really understand, not sort of understand. I'd like them to really understand.
them did was that it doesn't really seem fair.
I think they get that. I think even a 10-year-old knows what seems fair and not fair. So if you tell them people invented race for the purpose of, acquiring and keeping power, of course, that doesn't seem fair. Like you'd have to be maybe 5 or younger to not see that. So, okay, where are you going with this? Where are you taking them?
Kids have said, like, I don't really know even which group I fit into. How am I represented here?
Are these the only numbers for skin colors? No, there's like so many more. Some people are in between.
Guys, we're spending so much time on skin color. We're spending like a crazy amount of time on skin color.
I see people writing in the chat, I'm kind of in between a 3 and a 4.
Definitely let's fixate on our skin color.
One of the best things to say to a kid or a group of kids is, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is. That's a great question. And I'm now going to tell you I have the answer, but then I don't have the answer, but then I'm going to let you believe you had the answer, even though I fed you the answer.
I have that question too. Like you can move forward as a group together.
As a group together, don't have thoughts of your own. We can move forward as a group together. Is there room for one of the people in the class to go, I don't think it's white people that make anyone feel bad. I think it's just people, and sometimes and some people, and it's much more complicated than that. No, because they're 10.
Trying to figure out answers to that question, because a lot of these big topics don't have answers or don't have clear answers.
How does race show up in our lives? I know it's a it's a KWL chart. I know, I want to know, and here's what I learned.
And then the third lesson goes back to, so where did these ideas develop? And that's where we bring in power. And
that's where we bring in power. And of course, we're going to stay deeply rooted in colonialism and white people. And we're not going to talk at all about the people in Africa who were also oppressing other Africans, or the people in the indigenous tribes who were oppressing other indigenous tribes, or certainly not in Central America, where they were literally slaughtering them, ripping their hearts out of their living bodies, and so forth. No, it is going to exclusively be white to brown, which is false. Historically, factually false. Not to say that white people didn't oppress black people, because they did. But they didn't invent the concept of race. That's a lie. That's a lie. All it took was for people to notice that other people were different, or just decide that they could manufacture a difference because they wanted to, and thus race was born. And I'm not really sure. I think you'd be hard-pressed to figure out exactly who first came up with that concept, but it's most certainly not just white European colonizers. And that's when we bring power into it.
So, like early colonial America
Yeah, I told you.
A very unequal place.
Of course.
With a small group of people who held most of the wealth.
Yeah. And you know what? A large group of people who didn't hold wealth were also, what were they? Like, they were, white. Mm-hmm.
And this group of people not wanting the people who worked for them to rise up and
this paints a picture that every white person owned slaves, that all the people who worked for white people were slaves, and that all, or at least not white, and that all their sole purpose for that they invented racism so they could oppress the slave. No, racism was already in existence.
And overthrow this power. And so what did they do? They start to, separate people. They start to make one group against another group.
Honey, e pluribus unum. No, that's not how it worked at all. There was not some meeting of people going, we don't want these people to rise up over us, so let's separate a bunch of people. That's what y'all are doing now. That's what you're doing now. That's why it sort of feels right, feels familiar, because that's what you're living right now. But that's not what happened. That's inaccurate. In fact, it's inaccurate. There were lots of reasons people came to this country, and there were lots of different people who were enslaved or indentured servants or whatever. Most of them were white.
And then they start to give advantages,
They start to give advantages. There were this bucket of advantages, and they were giving them out.
Advantages, and then bigger advantages to people who look like them. And so this is where we're seeing this hierarchy based on skin color and place of origin.
Are you all ready to get started? At different times throughout history, selfish men have created unjust, racist laws and have spread racist attitudes as a way to divide the people they take advantage of.
These are fifth graders. So do they have the knowledge and capacity to challenge any of this? Mind you, I'm not disputing that one could interpret this interpretation from history. I'm disputing the appropriateness of this line of inquiry with 10-year-olds when they have yet to learn any of the historical facts. They have no context. They don't know what the time period was. They don't know what would be considered selfish then versus now. They don't know what else was going on that people were thinking about in terms of survival. They don't know how this country was built. They don't know what came before. They don't know what Europe was like at the time. They don't know a damn thing in the way of context. And they're not being allowed to guide their own learning. She's literally reading a series of opinions at them.
Prejudice has been used as a tool for these greedy men.
Greedy men. It's another greedy men. And they're men also. So we're sending the impression too that this is a male thing.
To protect their money and interests.
This is 100% opinion. This is casting people in the worst possible light, and en masse, I might add.
What do you all think?
I can only imagine. You just told them that greedy, selfish men created these racist laws for the purpose of oppressing people. I don't know. Let's put our thinking caps on. What do we think about that? I don't know.
What did we just learn here?
Did we learn?
Denny?
I learned that bad people maybe made the racist attitude, maybe they create racism to like
Bad people. They're bad people. Nothing they ever touched or did was good. They all got together and they did this very intentionally. You're hearing the undercurrent of this was intentional. That it wasn't like these things sort of evolved. That was the culture of the time. It was less evolved than now, and so forth and so on. And maybe there was some intent, but to ascribe intent to all of them, it does make you wonder, because there's some projection going on. I mean, if these people think there's so much ill intent in other people, you have to wonder what kind of ill intent is in them.
they ruin people's lives.
Ooh, created racism to ruin people's lives.
They created racism to ruin people's lives.
Prejudice has been used as a tool for these greedy men.
These greedy men and some greedy women and just some greedy people and some bad people and some good people. And prejudice, by the way, is living inside of your teacher right now. Just so you know. Is she a bad person?
To protect their stuff.
To protect their stuff. The implication, by the way, is that stuff is bad. There's no other reason you might want to protect your stuff other than racism. And when you want to protect your stuff, that's what you do, is you create racism. So we're linking the having of stuff and the protecting of stuff, property rights, to bad, greedy people who use racism to do it. So that's how they're going to get the idea in there at some point that property rights are racist. Property is white supremacy. This is a Marxist tenet.
They mostly did this just for like themselves, just like for them to have more power in a way.
For them to have more power. We're spending a lot of time in 5th grade talking about power, aren't we? Do you think they know what power means? Like, really? In whether it's in political terms, economic terms, literal terms, do you think they have any notion of what the different kinds of power are to be spending so much time on power? Have we gotten to that level? I don't think so.
Like they were protecting themselves as if like the people they took advantage of were bad.
And basically the law said we don't want people to mix together, because if people mix together, they're going to join forces.
Okay. This wasn't the whole country. Does she understand this was not the whole country that did this? Frederick Douglass had a white wife. So she's giving the impression that this was like all over the whole country. Not true.
They're going to see that we can be nice to each other. We don't need to separate into separate races and separate groups.
Nobody said we did. This is 2021.
The only way like...
Oh, wait, I forgot. You people do. You say that we should have affinity groups so that black and brown people can feel safe from the evil white people.
We could fix racism is that if we come together and stop separating each other.
Exactly. And you all did a beautiful job as usual.
Let's look at this. Wealthy men, selfish men created racism. White people made the laws because they have more power. Only white men will be able to vote and make laws because citizenship. White men are afraid that groups would join together and needed to keep... when I was taught this history, I wasn't taught it as white men. I was simply taught the people of the day, the men of the day, the people in power of the day. It wasn't about their color specifically. Obviously, they were white, but they didn't harp on the whiteness of them. She's not giving them any context or nuance for what was going on. And what kinds of things were happening in terms of strife and fighting and how, what was happening that they might make these laws. Again, I'm not justifying them. I'm contextualizing them.
I think what delighted me the most was
she was delighted
seeing how the work I had already been doing for those first 4 months of the school year.
3 or 4 months they spent on this, y'all. 5th grade social studies. Do you think they know? I mean, you know what I did in 5th grade social studies? We studied the Civil War. Just the Civil War. Actually, American history, but we studied the Civil War in depth. So we did study slavery, and we studied why the war was fought. We studied the North and the South and the different positions, the political positions, and why they felt differently and so on. And it was sort of a basic foundational course. But no, we didn't spend 3 months talking about race. No, we sure didn't. And it was an integrated classroom. It was a diverse classroom. And we didn't have any racial strife in that classroom in 1976.
Was being used and transferred into the work of that lesson. Just like the things that they brought up, it was so evident to me that we had already been having so many of the conversations.
It was so evident to me that I'd already put the knowledge in their heads. It's like she's oblivious to how much influence she has on these children.
Needed to have for this, conversation to be so fruitful. We're inching along, but this is really year-long work in my classroom.
It's year-long work, you guys. We're doing the work. It's year-long work to get them to understand about the greedy, selfish white men and how they invented race for the sole purpose of oppressing the black men, and so on and so forth. And it's just, it's this year-long process. We have to spend 3 months on it, including little Pantone cards of different colors of skin. This is what we learn in 5th grade social studies. We don't learn anything about anything. We don't learn any of the background knowledge or context for any of this information. They are learning this incredibly important and potentially divisive concept in a vacuum.
Those videos were the first 3 days of our launch into the struggle for freedom in our country.
The struggle for freedom. Let me guess, it's still ongoing.
And for justice. This work,
And for justice, for freedom, and for justice. Because it's a separate concept. It's not enough to be free. We have to have justice. Justice refers to the past. Everybody gets that, right? Justice is something you get for bad things that happened in the past. Well, the past is immutable. We can't go back and change it. Is there someone specific we can punish? Is there some specific crime that was done? And how would we get justice for people who were injured in the past today? Enter Ibram X. Kendi with anti-racism, and we need discrimination today to make up for all the discrimination she's teaching these kids about in the past. Justice. You can't get justice for the future. You can only get it for things that have already happened.
Needs to start young so that the next generation of change makers.
The next generation of change makers. Why do we want to change this, Allison? Do you know enough about the world that you know exactly what's broken? Have you lived out in the world so that you know all the things? I don't have to have all the answers. I don't know all the answers, but I want my students to be change makers. Do you know why? What do you want to change? What do you want to change it to? What are you going to make them believe they can change? Why are you making them believe that the world is so negative they have to change it? How about they know what it is before they decide to change it?
Can be informed as
they're not informed. They're indoctrinated. They don't know anything about anything.
Grow. It's important to shine a light on, the narratives that...
Your narratives. You're the one with narratives. You are literally the one with narratives. It is a myth that there is a narrative going around that, America is so perfect. We've never done anything wrong. And what? Slavery? What are you talking about? That is a narrative and a myth that I didn't learn. I'm a lot older than you. I'm a lot older than you. I learned about all the dark and dirty stuff in our history, including, by the way, things that luckily didn't affect us, like Soviet communism, which I'm sure you didn't learn about and are probably not going to teach these kids about, and all the people that were enslaved over there, or the people enslaved in Cuba, or the people enslaved in China right now, the people enslaved in Libya right now, by brown people because of their race, because they're black,
are not often taught in our...
They actually are always taught. They've been taught. You're just not correct here.
Our history, in American history, in our...
It's just not true. You're actually, I don't know if you're lying or ignorant, but you're absolutely wrong. I went to graduate school when you were probably in diapers. And I'm telling you that even in that incredibly progressive graduate school, we were taught to teach history about all this junk that you're talking about. People that I taught are in their 30s now. Okay? They're in their 30s.
Social studies curriculum. And then also like kids developing critical consciousness.
Notice it's critical consciousness. That's critical race theory. It's not critical thinking skills, critical consciousness. What is critical consciousness, Deb? Critical consciousness is when you're awake. That's where woke comes from. You're conscious of all the racism that exists around you, because you see, it's not whether it exists. It's not whether it took place. It's where and to what degree and who initiated it and what was the outcome. So critical consciousness is teaching you to go out there and identify all of it, all these little microaggressions, all this hidden racism. That's critical consciousness.
Being critical thinkers.
Oh, that comes second. But again, their definition of critical thinking is about the critical consciousness. So we have our critical consciousness. We then use that lens to critique everything.
Problem solvers. Like,
what problems are they going to solve with this information?
they need opportunities to be asked, like, what is your opinion on this?
No, they don't. They actually need opportunities to be able to say, I don't know enough about this to have an opinion. Teachers should be working on that. It's called epistemic humility. You should try it sometime.
How do you feel about this?
No, 10-year-olds don't need to have an opinion about everything.
They're doing that, they're learning.
No, when you're expressing your opinion, you're not learning unless someone is coming back at you saying, why do you form that opinion? On what basis do you form that opinion? Do you know anything about this, and this? You don't? Maybe you should. Maybe you should go learn some stuff like that before you form an opinion.
Part of the language to articulate, what they're seeing around them.
They're not seeing this around them except in your classroom where you're telling it to them.
This work should be centered.
Centered. We center. It's the religious language. We're centering, decentering, centering,
we can actually create real change.
That's not your goal. That's not your goal. What change are you trying to make? How about teaching these kids to read, write, do math, and understand that at 10 years old, they don't know everything?
As we move forward as a country, as we try to build a better country.
As we try to build a better, our country's just so bad. It's so awful. As we try to build a better, you're not trying to build anything. You're literally trying to tear it down.
Together.
See, Pizza Hut. Oh, and Facebook. Of course, they do all the whiteness trainings and the... So anyway, there you go, guys. I'm sure to get lots of hate in the comments, people who disagree with me tell me that 10-year-olds should have an opinion and they know everything and they about what they feel and they know and they should know and feel out loud about things and stuff. Well, if you say so, I disagree. I mean, they can. I'm not saying shut them down. I'm saying one of the things you can teach them is about context and how important it is, because knowledge is not just, I spoke my opinion out loud and someone listened to it, I have knowledge. No, that's not what knowledge is. There are facts. History did happen. You might try to teach them sometime, Ms. Dempsey. Anyway, if you value this sort of content, I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So you might consider joining my locals community where we have 2 Zoom calls a week, talk about all things related to education. It's a lot of fun. And that's about it. So thanks for watching.